Ready?
Ready?
Ever have a severe panic attack that threw you into a state of anxiety? Find out how Philip deepened his spiritual work while struggling to come out of anxiety and depression into the work he does as a spiritual advisor, doing astrology and card readings.
Welcome to Awakening Soul Divinity, your sacred space for deep healing and transformation. Listen to inspiring conversations with healing experts, spiritual guides, and teachers as we explore ancient wisdom, modern healing, and powerful stories of change. I'll also share practical insights from my personal journey, from spiritual crisis to inner purpose. Whether you're seeking to overcome anxiety, embrace your true nature, or awaken your higher self, this podcast offers guidance to help you transform your life and elevate collective consciousness.
Wow, Philip, I am so excited that you're here. Welcome. And
Thank you.
my excitement that you decided to join me on this journey is like, because this is more than just today. So you're welcome. Thank you for being
Yes.
here. All right. Now, here's the thing about Philip. I found Philip through a mutual friend of ours because I was looking for someone who could do an astrocartography reading for me. And we'll get into what that is a little bit later. But this reading, oh my gosh, it was absolutely incredible. I have learned so much more about astrology and now astrocartography. And it is just so cool. If you don't know what it is, you'll find out. My personal experience was that I feel like Philip is very intuitive and grounding, and he guided me through what I needed to know. And his reading goes beyond just the information, which I've had many readings before, and it was just like, well, here's this, and here's this, and here's a conjunction and a what is the thing on the old school conjunction junction which
Yes.
junction, yeah, so all the words of astrology that go like whoop, I just want to know what's going on, and that's who he is. He just guides me through, and it encompasses like this well-rounded understanding and intuition where he uses to connect with his clients. That's my experience, and I can't say enough about Philip and his work.
Thank
So
you.
you're welcome. So let's get started.
Sounds
Uh,
great.
can you briefly share a trauma or catalyst or an adversity or a challenging experience that led you to the path that you're on today?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the path itself was something that showed up for me fairly young. That was when I was actually in my teens. I had experiences that were highly intuitive, probably somewhat psychic, and not anything that was really super triggering, but I sort of followed this path. I got interested in astrology and read about it and just kind of touched on it just before I went to college. And then when I went to college, I really, of course, just had a great experience in terms of expanding myself. And when I came back out of my undergraduate, I had the summer off before I was going to graduate school, and that's when I went into a bookstore. This is Walden Books, which is like the great grandfather of Borders and
Barnes and
Amazon,
Noble. Yeah.
and came across an astrology book and tarot cards, and decided I wanted to learn something while I was taking the time before I went in to do my master's in English. But I sort of just continued to develop that. But the real traumatic experience that happened to me was after I had sort of really got my practice underway and was developing it. It wasn't something that I was as fully invested in yet, but was going down that road. And I also became a stay-at-home father. And this is all transpiring around 2007, 2008. I had already completed my doctorate. I was teaching some at UNC Greensboro and some at UNC Chapel Hill as well. But in 2009, I had a specific incident. I was at that point starting to do what was called the Body Mind Spirit Expo in Raleigh, and I'd done it for a couple of years. And I was going in to do the event. They do it every fall and spring, and it was the fall event in August. And I had a good friend at the time that was struggling, and my sort of role in a lot of people's lives is a problem solver. I am that person. I am, and because of my pursuing a doctorate, I'm also the person that people have a tendency to look towards for answers. And I pursued that. I wanted to be in that role. I accepted that. So what ended up happening was the trigger incident was I was there with my partner, my daughter's mother. We never married, and we were getting ready to start the show. And I received a call from my friend who was in need of me to come get him from where he was working because he was having a sort of an illness that was debilitating. He wasn't going to be able to drive, and so he and I had a long history from our childhood, but also karmically. And so what ended up happening was I got caught in an energetic pull between his need and my partner's expectation that I was going to be there for the show. And I decided that I wanted to go help my friend because in my mind, that person was in crisis. We weren't in crisis at the show. That was sort of my conscious level of thinking. So I get in the vehicle to go to pick him up, and on my way there, I have a severe panic attack. What would, as far as I could tell, a heart attack was happening as best I could understand or try to interpret it. So I pulled off the side of the road. I called my partner. I called 911 to get EMS out there, and they came out and took a look at me and said, "Well, you're not having a heart attack. You're having a panic attack." And that panic attack, that triggering moment, kicked in so deeply and so profoundly that it lasted me for 3 years, basically.
Wow.
And so the part of the journey that ties into everything was, first of all, having to learn a lesson of resisting all kinds of ways that I could have helped myself that I didn't want to do because I was against allopathic medicine. I didn't like the idea of taking any type of, mood altering drug. To me, that was a failure, a weakness, all of those classic male kind of crap things that I now can say are crap things. Um, so that was the triggering moment. And then it really was a tremendous setback because I became really just barely able to kind of keep my life going.
Hmm.
And not only that, but I was the stay-at-home parent at the time. So, I went from being very much kind of this in control, aggressive in terms of going after life, in terms of being a leader, all of these things. And then suddenly I was just trying to get my bed made each day. And if I could, and the child didn't die, I had succeeded for the day, which was a huge drop off from teaching university classes and writing an astrology book and developing my own tarot deck and all kinds of things that I had been working on or completed up until that moment.
Mm.
So that was the severe moment. Then, of course, out of that has come tremendous awareness, tremendous spiritual growth that I now use to be more effective with the clients that I work with. But it was definitely a dark night of the soul. And I'll mention this one connection. There was a book that I ended up reading that was very helpful to me as I was sort of deep into the process. It's called Spiritual Emergencies by Stanislav Grof, Grof. And in the book, he has a chapter on how essentially some people are shamanic and become shamans. And part of the shamanic transition is usually some sort of major breakdown that lasts for quite a long time. So the the other interesting thing that I've sort of come to be is nobody really should, at least from my personal experience, to stand up and say I'm a shaman. That's something that the community can give to you, but the sort of idea of like I'm a shaman, but I know I went through a shamanic experience. That is the part that was written about in Groff's book, and he's a research scientist, and so it was really interesting to read his work and for him to identify that this is a pattern, a spiritual pattern that people enter into quite often. And it was through his work that I came to understand what I was experiencing was actually a healing state because I got so far out of alignment because I was always helping everybody else and really being that person that would not ask for help, would not allow myself that kind of care. And so eventually my body was like, enough.
Mm-hmm.
You're not paying attention to little things. You're letting it build up. So we're going to give you the big thing and then see if you can figure it out from there. So that's the experience.
Yeah, that deep sigh was a recognition. I totally understand that. It's like, and you're an empath, correct?
I am. I am.
Okay. So, as we all know who are empaths, that we tend to give ourselves away to everybody else because we don't like to see people in pain. We don't even think about ourselves as being in pain until we keep doing it over and over and over again, and then we be in pain. So,
Yes.
mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, whatever that is, that can be the life of an empath if we don't really understand what that is. And most of us don't because our world is not created to help us to understand our truth. So we have a tendency to be like, why is this going? Why am I crying and everything? Why am I helping everybody else and I can't help myself? That whole thing. And then, whew, depression. Been there, understand that completely. So
Yes.
thank you so much for sharing that. I do have a couple of questions I'd like for you to like emphasize on a couple of things that you said was
Sure.
um first question is what do you think that particular incident was telling you at that point?
So I think what it was telling me at that point was I have to start learning how to have better boundaries.
Mm,
And so one of the things that it also taught me is part of being in the 3D experience is that there are very real limitations. And what ended up happening in that moment was akin to being given a really unpleasant choice and having to make that choice. And
mm,
in my mind, what I was having to do was I was having to choose between the person who was my lover and the parent of my child and this person who I have known since I was 15 and we had a very intense bond as friends, but we
mm,
also had a karmic bond. So there was a lot of threads that came through in this in terms of understanding karma with people. And what's interesting is that my partner, we actually are forming new karma in this lifetime. And the person that I was going to go see and try to help, we had very deep karma. In fact, we were in Vietnam together and in our past life. And we had both died fairly young in Vietnam. And so and this ties into learning about past life regression and really connecting with all of this reincarnation energy, which
smart
helps,
people.
yeah, which really
Yeah.
helps to explain things. But so what ended up happening was basically I found myself in a situation where no matter what choice I made, in my mind, I was going to let somebody down.
Mm, mm-hmm.
And the idea of letting someone down, especially two people at such a high level in my story, broke me. It's as simple as
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
My brain just fried.
I get it. I
And
get it because and I had a situation. I'm not going to get into the situation itself, but the same question came up. It's like, well, somebody else in my life is upset with me because I made poor choices. But how do you make a choice when they're both bad choices? It's like, what do? You got to take one, you got to do one.
right,
So you're going to have some kind of thing happen, an occurrence happen, no matter which choice that you pick. And thinking that through and trying to figure out what the best case scenario would be when there is no best case scenario,
right,
so
right.
that's very challenging.
If I'd stayed, I'd still had the panic attack. If I hadn't got on the road to go pick up my friend, but I'd stayed, I still would have had the panic attack.
But you know what? You would have been in a good spot for a bunch of people helping you through it spiritually, right?
Well, what's interesting now, this again, testament to my stubbornness.
Yeah.
I ended up going back because I had a presentation I was supposed to give that weekend. And I went back and actually completed the presentation, which insane. But at that time, and again, this is the idea of understanding reflectively that there was no other way for it to go about than the way it did go about.
Hmm.
And truth of the matter is that the people at the time would not have been able to help me because my mindset was I I am the person that helps other people. And so, that needed to be broken down in a really severe way.
Can't help me. I can help me, even when I am tumbling off of a
Right.
cliff right now. Ah!
Exactly, exactly. No, I'm just drowning over here. It's okay. I'm fine. You know. and so yeah, there was definitely many layers of unpacking that took quite a bit of time to actually unpack. But
Yeah.
the triggering moment was these two things that were pitted against one another, and it meant that someone was going to be disappointed. So for me, the most profound way that my father just discovered how to move me when he needed to move me when I was a young person was all he had to say was, "I'm disappointed in you." Now, for an empath, for who I was, that was just crushing. And so
No.
that would straighten me out faster than any sort of corporal punishment or reward, whatever it was. That was the thing.
But you picked that family just like I picked mine.
Oh, and I picked mine even more deliberately in that I'm adopted. So
Oh,
I picked
right.
people,
Yes. That's
I picked people to funnel me onto the planet, and then I went over here and picked these other people to actually do the raising part of me.
wow.
So
You
a lot of
really,
different soul contracts that were in play in my story. Absolutely.
it's not surprising that you were a high level university professor because this is your high level university life school.
Oh yes.
You had to keep up. You had to balance all that stuff out. So yeah, it looks like you've had. Now, can you, not everybody in the audience knows what karma is exactly. I mean, we've heard it, most of us probably, and there's a somewhat understanding of it, but could you kind of explain what that is real quick?
Sure. So one of the things that, and I'll sort of get into a little bit of a kind of a teaching mode here, and this is something that we had talked about, and or at least when I had sent in my answers to your questions. So we all go through the world trying to explain things. How do things work, right? And from an academic standpoint, I would call that an explanatory model.
Mhm.
So Christianity is an explanatory model. Racism is an explanatory model, not a particularly good one, has a lot of limitations to it, and it's easy to prove how limiting it can be with some examples out in the world. But what I found, and this is just again a little bit of my backstory, is that of course I have an academic background, which means that for a period of time I was a fantastic atheist. I mean, one of the best. I used to teach it. I've read all the books, whether we're talking about, Hitchens or Daniel Dennett. I can give a list of authors that I've all read through and used to teach them and all that. But there were things that happened in my life that explanatory model, the atheistic, scientific, pure sort of Newtonian model explains a lot. It does great. If I need to know, what, a bridge needs, how much weight it needs to hold, I want to have that Newtonian explanatory model. But when I started to have certain experiences in my life that model just couldn't handle, then I had to start looking elsewhere. And so karma and reincarnation as an explanatory model suggests and proposes that our souls constantly are moving between lives. We're going through a lifetime, we pass, we return to a spiritual experience, we come back into another lifetime, and we go through this cycle repeatedly because we want to learn all possible things as a soul, which means that we can't get it all done in one lifetime. We certainly can't get it done as one gender. We certainly can't get it done in one culture, all of that. So what happened was when I started to have to understand things like, for example, I had this really irrational fear of the ocean. And I never had any bad experiences at the ocean in this lifetime. I mean, even if I asked my parents, it's like, did you take me to the beach when I was like an infant and drop me in the water and or something? I mean, did something like that? Nothing that would be I could point to and go, that in this lifetime, that was my fear. So when I was going through some of the work I was doing while I was dealing with my severe anxiety, I started to do past life regression work with other people who were hypnotherapists. And then I found a technique that I could actually do using balance or basically muscle testing through
Mhm.
balance.
Mhm.
And so I went back and I wanted to ask this question of what's this fear of the ocean? I can't see anything in this lifetime that deals with it. So what I found out was that in a past life, going back 1500 years in India, my daughter and I were connected. I have a daughter, and we have a tremendous karmic connection. And in that lifetime, I was in a small village. I was a priest. That's a role I get to play a lot in my previous lifetimes and current one as well. And there was a plague at the time. And
Mm.
so I was trying to help out with the plague, and I was concerned that my daughter might catch it. So I sent her away. and everyone in the village died except for me. And it was so traumatic that I swam out into the Indian Ocean and committed suicide. And that connection with that lifetime and the connection with my daughter came into this lifetime with me. And so when I was going to the ocean, what I was picking up was that lifetime because of that karmic connection. And what's interesting is we don't connect with all of our lifetimes. We have emphasis that is particular to each lifetime for us to work on. And so the life regressions that if you do them, and the ones I've done have gone to very specific lifetimes that are specifically connected with experiences I'm working on in this lifetime. And so that as an explanatory model helped tremendously
Mm,
because it also explains why certain people I pass and they don't register for me. I have no karma with them. They're not even interesting to me to create karma. And then there are people that I have an interaction with, and it's so clearly karmic. And that would be, the people that I married. I have a previous marriage that ended some time ago. And then now what's interesting is I said a moment ago, my partner, that's my daughter's mother, we actually are creating karma. We actually had a contract to meet each other as new people in this lifetime. Now, the current marriage that I'm in that I'm trying to end, that one is ridiculously karmic. So it varies, but it helps explain why certain things are the way they fold or unfold,
mm,
why they are requiring a certain type of experience, or why something's happening, but someone would look at it and go, well, that's not fair. I'm like, yeah, but that's because you were an asshole in a previous lifetime and you're actually getting to take care of it in this lifetime. So, you can think you're wonderful, but the bottom line is that we've all had past lives where we were not the best people. And sometimes we have things that are trying to clear that karma up, and we can look at it and go, well, that's not fair. Well, yes, if you're looking at it from an atheistic sort of singular one-time lifetime, you could put it in that category, but it's still happening to you. And I'm more interested in, well, if it's happening to me, I kind of want to know if there's a way I can explain it.
mhm.
Reincarnation, karma, these provide a much more comprehensive explanatory model. And that's why I use them with my clients, and I found it incredibly helpful in my own life.
Mhm. Beautiful. I love that description. And for those of you who don't really understand what it is yet, just ask the questions. I mean, you may not find something that you might not understand or believe now, but something's going to ring true with you in whatever, like for me, I'm a researcher. I love researching anything. I will, something pops in and I'm like, Google, whatever. And it's just so important to me to ask the questions. I
Sure.
think the questions, even if why is not such a good question because you never know what that is. You're not really going to find that out. But the questions like, well, what's this? Or could this be? Or what if? Those types of things. Those are questions you can ask without trying to, wrap your head around something that you have no current understanding on. But it
Sure.
opens up a world of curiosity. And that to me, that's really important. So, okay. Well, thanks for that description. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Okay. So, your personal healing journey, how has that shaped the work that you're doing now to support other people?
Well, of course, and this is a phrase that might be lost on a lot of young people. There are no atheists in foxholes. And a foxhole was what World War I individuals would dig to try to get below the bullets flying overhead or the bombs flying overhead. And the idea being that when you are desperate enough, you will look at anything as a possible way of explaining something. If you don't have the things that are explaining in front of you, they're doing a good enough job. You'll expand your reach in some cases. So what ended up happening for me was at this point when I had this, I was on my way professionally as an astrologer. I had already started to build a practice in which people were paying me, and this also is part of learning to manage the empath energy is that one of the things that I discovered was that I can help people, and it really works well when I'm doing it under a constrained set of rules, like this is what I'm going to do for you for this amount of time. And once we're done with that time, I can disengage energetically. And that became a tool. The professional practice was a tool for also getting better at managing the empathy and not getting overwhelmed. So that was one of the things that was also happening at the time. But then it became the tool to try to also see what was going on for me astrologically that the astrology as an explanatory model might have been helpful. And it was ridiculously helpful. And that we all have a series of transits that we experience that are common to us based on time. So when you're born, a chart is basically a snapshot of the solar system when you took your first breath. And then it continues in motion. And all of the points in a chart move at different speeds based on their astronomy. So, for example, Saturn will, when you're born, be at a certain point in a certain sign. And then after 28, 29 years, it comes back around to that same point in that same sign. It's called a Saturn return.
Mm.
And we all get it at 28, 29. And it is a cycle of Saturnian energy. And Saturn is a fancy word astrologically for our responsibility, how we define ourselves, what are our duties that we have to fulfill. And so the first 29, 28, 29 years of Saturn journey is all of the stuff that you get piled on you from your family, your culture, your peers. You get all that stuff. You've also got your own stuff. But when you get to the Saturn return, you have to start going, well, what am I keeping and what am I getting rid of? So then the next significant encounter is going to be a square with Neptune in itself and Pluto in itself. And then there's the Uranus opposition. And this all happens between 37 and 44. It varies a little bit depending on when you were born. Now, for those of us that were born, let's say between 1960 and 1970, they are sequential. It starts out with Neptune, then it's Pluto, and then it's the Uranus opposition. For the people that are coming up into their late 30s and early 40s now, the people that have it now, the Neptune and the Pluto are actually on top of each other in terms of that squaring energy. So, but these are things where we can look at it and go, you're going to get a significant shift in your story. And that's what happened is that I can also look at the astrology of that date, August the 9th, 2020, 2019, actually. And I can look at that date and go, oh, not, sorry, 2009. It was 2009. But I can look at that date and see my astrology chart and what's called transits, which is where the planets were at the time of that day as it impacts my chart. And then I could see, oh, yeah, I was due for some kind of major shift.
Mm-hmm.
And so how it plays out is based on the individual astrology and the individual story. But the fact is that we're all supposed to get these sort of patterning shifts, and we all have to deal with them in a certain way. The astrology was my way of seeing where it was happening to me and why it was happening to the way it was. So astrology became a tool that really through the process, not only this happened at a certain time, but also what I was going to be dealing with from a timing perspective. It actually let me know how long some of this energy was going to be in play, which
Mm-hmm.
was very comforting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like watching a storm. I refer to looking at astrology like cosmic weather. And sometimes you've got a hurricane coming down the road and you can't get out of the way of it.
Mm-mm.
So it's like,
We'll go
okay, but
into
if I
that later.
know, how do
We'll
I
get into
manage it?
that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think astrology to me is very cool. How it's what, like 6,000 years old or something. How old is astrology?
Well, every culture's had it. If
Yeah.
you've got a culture that's existed, whatever they've existed, they'd have some sort of astrological system. So if you can find a culture going back 10,000 years, they have some astrology. The astrology we're familiar with, easily 6,000 years, no doubt
Yeah.
about it.
And what's so interesting about astrology to me is that when I hear people poop, it doesn't, no, astrology has to do with the planets. We are floating on a rock in the solar system, ours. There's many more, right? And they move and they have energy and there's magnetism and there's all this stuff going on out there. And somehow it connects with us on this planet because it's a planet, right? And the magnetism
Absolutely.
on this planet and how we function as human beings on this planet. So there's stuff out there and there's stuff on here, this planet, and there's stuff in here going on. So when I hear people say, oh, that doesn't, I mean, again, do your research, be curious, go look into the Mayans, go look into the ancients, the way they connected with themselves, with the planets, all these places that people go to connect with the earth to see, like Stonehenge. All these places are set up to mirror the universe.
Right.
And so there's something to be said about this, and it has nothing to do with, that stuff doesn't mean anything. That's that. Okay. Just go find out. it's not going to hurt you to just ask the question, right? Because it's so powerful how it affects us. And even just something as simple as a full moon, right?
Sure.
When every body and everything seems to lose its mind at a full moon. Go into a hospital, go talk to a cop, ask them what's going on a full moon. There's something to be said about this. So I just wanted to say that to clarify that that's not horse pocky, that there's something to this. Okay, now that I said that, all right, I've got another question for you, and I think it's kind of the same as I already asked before, but let's see what happens with it because I think there might be a little bit of other information here you can give us.
Sure.
Can you explain the power of reincarnation as an explanatory model or belief that helps address concerns which aren't easily explained just by this lifetime? I mean, you kind of went into that already, but we have a lifetime right now that is a reincarnated life. So,
Right.
based off of the one that we're living in now, did that make sense?
It did. So,
Okay.
for example, let's use the one that I did give, which is I definitely had a much better energy around going to the ocean after I had done the past life work.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't want to suddenly become a fisherman and go out on a boat and fish anytime soon as a profession, But what it did allow me to do was to understand why I felt what I felt about the ocean in a way that allowed me to actually go and enjoy the ocean now,
Mm-hmm.
and to realize that part of that is also going to be tied to that energy, and releasing it doesn't mean again that suddenly you're switching over to, oh my goodness, now I want to go move to the Bahamas and be whatever, working on the ocean. No, that's not the case. And so the idea is that when we have awareness about something that we're getting as a message that maybe is tied to a past life, then we can start to unpack it. We can start to maybe deal with it better. We can even sometimes embrace it depending on what it is. I mean, the situation with my daughter is also profound because in that past life, I sent her away and I never saw her again. And that's the soul that is connected to me now. And so I'm getting to have the life that I didn't get to have with her. And that's very important to me to have that experience. And so one of the things, um, and and I'll do my best to say this without getting too emotional. It's difficult, so I'm going to prep it by saying that as a hope that I can get through it. But when my daughter was very young, verbal, maybe 3 or 4 years old, we were lying on a bed because again, I was the stay-at-home parent, and I was asking her because she's an old soul, and this is a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, and I asked this question. I was like, "Why did you choose your mom and me to be your parents?" And she had this sudden clarity, this lucidity that was obviously her soul's lucidity, and she said, "Because you're kind."
Wow. Now you're gonna make me cry. Is that why you were gonna cry?
I'm doing my best to hold it back right
Okay,
now,
I'm not. Oh wow.
but it's that realization that there is that soul connection, and we wanted to have a chance to repair that relationship that did not succeed 1,500 years ago.
Mm.
And so and again, the other thing that the reincarnation, it's easy to talk about it in terms of these kind of positive experiences, but there's also reincarnation that is difficult. And that can be that, you have the one that I've encountered quite frequently as a professional, as a practicing professional dealing with clients, is the one that's usually very, very difficult is the parent-child relationship, and where the child is the parent in this lifetime, and the parent is the child in this lifetime. And in the previous lifetime, the parent that is the child in this lifetime was not kind to the child that is the parent in this lifetime.
Okay, hold on. Let me wrap my head around that because I'm thinking at the same time of my own and what you just said. Because okay, so the parent
In this lifetime is the
lifetime was
child
the
from the
child in another lifetime
and the parent that was in the previous lifetime is now the child.
in this lifetime.
Right. So now you think about how that creates a power dynamic that can be really
Sure.
problematic, especially
100%.
if those previous lifetimes were not good.
Hmm. Okay.
So the hard swallow of spiritual practice, and it's interesting, I write normally for a website called askastrology.com. I usually write 20 to 30 articles a month for them. And one of the articles I wrote a while back was the advantages of being spiritually aware. And so I wrote an entire article about the advantages of being spiritually aware. But I also at the same time wrote an article about the disadvantages of being spiritually aware
Yay. Okay.
because it isn't all rainbows and unicorns being spiritually aware. I can tell you that right now. It's like looking at what's going on astrologically and what's going on in the wider world right now. The circumstances are going to be rough. They already are, but what also people really have to struggle with from an astrological standpoint is these are when I first started talking about kind of where things are now, I started in 2020 before COVID was even, no, because I was looking at astrology. I was looking at a tool. My tool was saying, hey, this thing that's happening in the sky is a marker for some really heavy shit that's coming down. Oh, and by the way, it's like a baseball game. 9 innings long, every inning's a year. This is the first inning. You could have heard the groan in the crowd when I did this presentation. Because again, it's also an American crowd. It's like, wait, we have immediate gratification needs. We want to know when this is going to be fixed, like in the next 2 or 3 months. I'm like, oh no, 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 no. This
This
is
is
a
a
10-year
decade.
plan. Yeah, this is a
This is a
10-year
decade.
plan,
Great.
right?
Yeah.
And so
A 10 inning game.
a 10 and there's going to be some overtime. You can bet that's
Right.
the case.
That's lovely.
Um,
Okay.
so there again, it's like it's sort of the emperor's no clothes thing. Don't tell us bad news. I'm like, well. It's not that it's bad news. This is the news, but the news is very hard because life is like that. 3D experience is like that.
Hmm.
And astrology is a tool by which we can look at things and go, oh, here's the pattern. This is the duration of it. We have choices within the pattern. The word I like to use a lot of times to describe astrology is elasticity.
Hmm.
Now, if you were to engage with certain forms of astrology, most commonly actually Vedic astrology, which is an Indian Eastern astrology, which tends to be a little more deterministic. If you go to a Vedic astrologer, you can usually go and say, when am I going to get married, age, and all this stuff, and get these definitive answers, right? Um, Western astrology or tropical astrology, which is what I practice, is much more like, well, you're an agent, but there are constraints, right? What I know for sure is that when Pluto was last in Capricorn, the United States came into existence. The Revolutionary War happened. So as it came back around on itself, which recently the United States just had its Pluto return 247 years later, it's not surprising that revolution is really what's happening. And revolution can build something or it can tear it down. And that's the other thing about astrology is it's not in here to be a morality play. It's in here to understand energy. And then the human beings have to make the decisions about how to approach it. So,
Can I throw something in here and see get your opinion on it?
yeah.
Um, my existence has been focused on healing, doing healing work to now that I understand and cover the truth of who I am, right?
Hmm.
And obviously, astrology is part of that. But what I'm hearing for myself, and you tell me if I'm on the right track,
Sure.
is that it's almost like astrology is a guidance system for us to understand what's happening and how we can respond in our own lives to that, because our own response in our lives is going to go out anyway, right? The thing that I was thinking when you were saying that was, I think that if we completely ignore what's going on in the stars, what's going on with the ancients, what's going on with these, for example, these power places in the world like Stonehenge, or I mean, there's even one in Washington, D.C. Uh,
Right. Ley lines, all of it. Sure.
right?
Absolutely.
108, and it was built on a Native American burial ground. So, there's all these things happening. But if we keep living our lives the way we're doing it and we keep going, I don't want to now I just want my gratification instant. Now I want it. I want to be happy now, whatever. Every time it feels like we do that to ourselves and we don't heal and we don't look at ourself as part of this process. It almost like it, well, does it create karma? That was the first, I didn't even think about that before,
Sure.
but it's like, I feel like it's important to dislodge, if that's a good word enough, from all of that karma by doing the healing work and reconnecting with spiritual. And the thing about it is that spirituality is going to be in somebody's mind something completely different than what it actually is. To me, that's what it feels like. It's, there's such an energetic power within spirituality, and I feel like astrology is this like container for it.
Well, let me give you my two things that I like to talk about with the concept of astrology. The first is that the chart is not the person. It's a vehicle that your soul
Right.
decided to drive around in. And the example I always use is twins. Let's imagine you've got two twins and they're born no more than a few minutes apart, maybe 5 minutes apart.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, they have the same chart, but they don't have the same soul, and that matters. So let's imagine, for example, and let's give a chart. Let's use a car example. Let's imagine that the chart that I'm looking at is essentially a Toyota Camry. We'll just call this is a Toyota Camry chart. And we've got one rolling off the assembly line, and then the other soul is rolling right off the assembly line. So you got these two people, soul-wise, that are in these Toyota Camry astrology charts. One of them, however, got their start as a charioteer in the Roman Empire and is basically a race car driver. And the other one's a farmer. Now, you put the race car driver in the Toyota Camry, that's going to be a frustrating life.
Mm-hmm.
You put the farmer in the Toyota Camry, and they're like, hey, this is a really practical vehicle. Good stuff, right? So there's the soul issue, which the chart is a tool or a vehicle, whatever, metaphorically. And I like the vehicle because it gives a way of understanding that, yeah, you can have charts that are Humvees, you can have charts that are tanks, you can have charts that are bicycles, depending on design, all kinds of complexity that go into it. So it's a nice metaphor to kind of play around with. But you get someone put in something, and if the soul and the chart have a dislocation, it's so they can learn. It's so the learning can happen for that soul. And that's where people can really encounter frustration, or they can find real flow. Like, some people, they've got easy flow because the chart they have and the soul they have are nicely synced up. They go in and out of sync for learning purposes, basically. So then there's this other thing that this one is the one that usually puts people back on their heels if they're light workers. And I'm going to just go ahead and put you back on your heels. We're not here to make the planet a better place. We're not. We're here to have individual experiences. It's testing ground. It's the reason why we have not moved the needle an inch, not even an inch, in terms of human behavior. Now, yes, we've got tremendous technology, right? We're both sitting in air-conditioned rooms and we're talking through this technology, but we also have child trafficking. We also have cruelty. We also have, dungeons that are still in existence to throw people into for them to suffer. So my point of astrology is it's very personal. It's very much a tool to help you understand your journey. And as a soul, what do you want your journey to be? If you want to be helpful to the world, absolutely. That may be your soul design. That may be even be the astrology that you have. But ultimately, what I've discovered is the whole point of reincarnation is we don't learn if we don't deal with an environment that puts us to the test. And the thing that's interesting is when people talk about, oh, well, this is one that always gets me. I kind of find a little bit humorous is I'll sometimes meet people that will say, this is my last lifetime. I'm never coming back. I've achieved what I need to achieve and all this, that, and the other. And I'm thinking,
I wish.
wow, you're
Okay.
you're you're a young soul because only a young soul would actually say that. You
Mhm.
know, an old soul generally is like, no, sex is really good. I'm going to come back for some sex. I really like these, terrible foods that they make, like Oreos. Oreos are wonderful. I want some Oreos, right? And not only that, but being in spirit is boring.
Mm.
I know what you think. You know what I think. We're all kumbaya. Why do you think we come down here? Is because we need a break from spirit, usually. And so the interesting work to connect it scientifically through past life regression and hypnosis is Dr. Newton's work, especially the book he wrote about life between lives. But here's the thing is that so what he realized was when he was doing regressions with people, someone would say, yes, I remember this time in France from 1837 to 1875. And then he would go, okay, and then in your next life, oh, yes, I was in Asia from 1890 to, hey, wait a second. What happened between 1875 and 1890? There's 15 years that's unaccounted for. And he's like, oh, that's when I was in spirit. I returned to the spirit realm, and a lot of times when there's a break between a past life and the next lifetime, whatever the length of that break is usually dependent upon whatever you experienced in that lifetime as to how much a break you actually need or want to take.
But that's confusing though, and I've always been wondered or have wondered about that is like it's not linear. It like you can go back to spirit and then go back to a totally different like the 400s or whatever. So you're in the 50.
Well, again, but that's not how you're experiencing it though in this lifetime. You're correct in that there is no linearity in spirit, but there is linearity in how we are expressing our experience. So from a particular time to a reincarnation time, whatever time passed spiritually is still tied to the timeline that you're re-entering into by being connected to the timeline of being on the earth. So in that regard, it is linear.
Okay.
So what Newton was pointing out was is that whether that soul goes to the fourth dimension or goes to another planet or whether it goes back in time if they want to, whatever, they're still connecting one from one to the other because they're seeing their soul connectivity between those two periods of lifetime. But he found that there was this little slice between the lifetimes that really for him became the idea of this is what is a spiritual experience. So
All right.
one of the ways I like to sort of also explain an astrology chart is let's imagine you're in spirit and you're like, you know what? I need a break. I want to go on a vacation. So I'm going to go down to this vacation bureau in spirit, right? Just imagine it's a bureau of vacation. And they're like, oh, yeah, we've got this place. You've been there before. Earth. You want to go back to Earth? But here you can go to Earth. And then they say, okay, what do you want to choose from to have as your experience that you haven't had before? Oh, I want to be rich. Or let's get really dramatic. I want to be molested as a child. I haven't had that experience yet. From a spiritual standpoint, everything is just an experience. And again, this is where it gets a little bit hard sometimes for people that want to create this sort of idea of everything's going to be beautiful. You know it's not. You can look around the world and go, it's not. But also, all souls are trying to have an experience. And then in the larger context of spirituality, spirituality is wanting all of those different experiences as its totality as well. So you go to this travel bureau and you go, okay, here's my list of things that I'm going to select from, my a la carte menu, right? I want this kind of family. I want this kind of job. I want this kind of desire to do something, whatever it is. And some of those things, like I said, you could select that could be really difficult because you haven't had that experience. And then the travel agency does this really fun thing. They say, okay, this is really cool. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to send you to Earth again, and we're going to erase your memory by sending you through this thing called the birth canal.
Yeah, yeah,
If you
yeah.
go through it, or
Uh-huh.
you get removed by C-section, you're
Uh-huh.
going to forget everything you signed up for, unless you check this little box at the bottom of the form that says, I want to know my astrology chart. If you check the little box that says, I want to know my astrology chart, at some point in your journey, you will come to astrology. And when you do, you will see the map of your selection.
Oh my
And then what
God.
I do is I try to help people interpret what they signed up for as a map.
Bam! That was good. I like how you looped right back at that was good. That's good commercial.
So
Oh my
this is
God.
my infomercial for astrology.
Oh, that was beautiful. Okay. Well, thanks for that. I appreciate it. That part makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, there's so much going on here in so many different directions. It's like,
Absolutely.
oh, with cognitive dissonance.
Well, and that's why people ask me, why do I really enjoy astrology? And I'll tell them, I said, at the end of the day, it's all about you.
Hmm.
If someone comes to me and says, oh, hey, I heard you're an astrologer. I'm a Taurus. What can you tell me? I'm like, not a whole lot. I can give you a whole lot of information about Taurus, but if you want to know about you, I need to know your chart. I need your birth time, your birth date, and your birth location so that I can get a really zeroed in bit of information because then I'm going to have this very complex model of knowledge that I can tap into and I can give you useful responses.
Hmm.
And so yeah, it gets you can get so into the weeds with astrology because its
Yeah.
complexity is reflective of, and again, going back to explanatory models, astrology is an explanatory model. Why do I like it? Because it does a really good job of explaining things.
Well, yeah, it does. And as far as you go personally, your way of doing it, it's like you're not just using the tool, you also are intuiting what's around that tool and within that person, and you're bringing like this, you're making this whole story come together to make sense for somebody, which I
Absolutely.
think is really neat. Wow. The,
So that's where I get to leverage a little bit of professional training. So my doctorate is in English, but my specialty was rhetoric and composition. So what I was really interested in studying in detail was how do we tell stories?
Mhm.
And then one of the things that being an empath helps me with is when I used to teach, I have extremely excellent peripheral vision. And one of the things I could always see out in the classroom, no matter how the seating was set up, was when someone got lost. A student would have a look on their face. I'm like, you
Yeah.
just got lost. Whatever I just said just lost you. And we're going to come back around and I'm going to try to get you back into the understanding. And
Right.
so, one of the things when I do work with clients, of course, is that I'm very attuned to how they're reacting, how you're reacting. Plus, I'm cheating as well. I've got your chart in front of me. So, I know communication
You
styles
know
based
too
on where
much
Mercury is.
about me.
Right. And so, you can see why this can be a little bit of a difficulty in dating in a dating life too.
I was
So,
just gonna say that. Yep.
right.
Hmm.
So the idea is that it allows for this. My idea when I decided to do this, and I went into my backyard. This is going back to 2013. 2013 is when I officially hung out my shingle. And I said to Spirit, look, you want me to do this? I'm good. I really love it. I enjoy it. But see that house over there that I'm standing next to? It needs to be heated and cooled. This body that I'm walking around in has to be fed. And there's a certain economy that we have set up. It can be whatever you want to think about it as, whether it's a good economy or not, doesn't matter. I have to get these things processed in order to make this work. If you want me to do this, then I need to make sure that these things can be satisfied.
Hmm.
And so, the idea of it then is what is your journey? And then when I work with clients, my goal is to be as efficient and helpful as I can with
Hmm.
your time.
Hmm.
And what is it that you are really wanting to know or understand? And I want the tool to empower you.
Hmm.
You are an agent of your own story. Now, there are limitations to that because you're dealing with other agents around you, or you're dealing with the agency of your state, you're dealing with the agency of your country. All of these things, there are all competing things. As you say, there's a lot of different competing pieces of it. But, the chart allows us to get down to, well, what did you sign up for? And sometimes by also facing a frustration in your chart, you find out about your soul design, right? So one of the things that happens, and another thing that I do, the astrocartography that you mentioned at the beginning, which is location astrology, what will happen sometimes is someone will go, oh, I've always wanted to go to this place. And I will look at the map, and the map will actually not show any dramatic energy in that location. What that lets me know is that that location is a past life location for them and isn't tied to their astrology in this lifetime.
You didn't say that to me.
So if there's a place where you've found that doesn't have, any energy around it,
Yeah.
that isn't to say to ignore it. It's just that it has a different meaning. And that's where it's
Yeah.
really cool because the tools have their limitation, but sometimes in their limitations, you can discover other things
Mm.
that can be equally valuable.
I wanted, thanks for all that information. That was fantastic. I mean, this is stuff, it's blowing me away because I love astrology. I love all this stuff. I don't have the patience to learn it. I learned this much, enough to get me into trouble. But having said that, it's good to have people like you around who knows what this is. Um, I had a curiosity question because we had talked about the depression and anxiety, and that's a lot of that's going on
Hmm.
right now, and it's been going on for a while. And I know you said you learned that depression and anxiety were meant to be healing states.
Yes.
The more we resist it, the harder they are to process. Can you explain what that is and kind of share like um, how they showed you how far out of alignment we can unknowingly become over time?
Yeah, certainly. So, the first one of the things I've spent more time talking about and sharing with people are the 5 stages of grief. And the 5 stages of grief is a theory that I think really is very interesting. And the idea of it is something happens And the first four stages are kind of, they're not linear, they kind of mix together, but there's denial, there's anger, there's bargaining, and there's depression. And then, of course, the final stage is acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have something like what happened to me, the first thing is, and this is what's also happened around me, is like, well, wait a second, you have a partner who is very successful. In other words, you can be a stay-at-home parent without having to worry about work because my partner was in corporate and she was doing very well and she loved it. So we didn't have a money issue. I had excellent health. I've always been in good health, athletic. I obviously have a lot of things that give me advantages in life in terms of intelligence or in terms of capability or even charisma, these things. So it was very hard for people to understand, like, why are you having a problem, right?
Yeah.
You're not down and out. You're not coming back from a war zone. You're not any of these things that would be almost in a way people would give me a pass. And that to me was also another part of it that was important was that what was happening to me, I was still in a state where I was barely functional. I didn't want to be out in the world. Going to the grocery store was horrifying to me. I had to just, I was also not very energized. I couldn't do anything athletic because I was so down and out. And so that's when I found Stanislav Grof's book, the Spiritual Emergencies book that I mentioned earlier, is that gave me a tool to read and go, wait a second, what's happening to me is I am trying to heal.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to heal by being disengaged. And in a world that we currently live in, there's almost no room for that. And
Right.
the reason is that that actually amplifies the anxiety, right? It's like
Yeah.
I need to be able to cocoon and heal and rest. And it's like, no, you shouldn't do that because, this needs to be, you need to take care of this, you need to take care of that. And so part of it was really understanding that the healing state has a certain behavior to it that I had to come to accept. And that was part of the work as well, was that, oh,
Okay.
wait a second, this depression is something I need to try to understand and think about, how to move through it and how to adjust myself so that, my measure before going into it was I would accomplish a long list of things every day, right? I had a long to-do list. And then I had to readjust myself to where literally if I got up and I got my bed made and I showered and the child was fed, that was a glorious day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But against my mindset of where I was an absolute failure.
Well, I mean, we're programmed to feel that
Right.
way, and it's been going on. This training has been going on for of quite a few generations now, and I think, uh, honestly, I think that the way things are right, that we're starting to be awakened to in this country and on the planet is all part of that training. I mean, who humans are supposed to work 4 hours a day. And it's not sitting behind a computer at a desk inside, disconnected from the earth. It's like, where did that information come from? And why don't I take a look and see what that is so I can understand what this means? I mean,
Yes.
but that's the thing. The programming has been a big thing with that. And especially in this country, in this culture, you brought up grief. Now, that's one of the things that I worked with people with because I personally understand grief very well. And I've assisted other people to walk through grief. And the challenge with grief in this country is that just like feelings, we are taught to stuff them down. And when they're stuffed down and it comes a point where they're ready to come out, they're going to come out no matter
Right.
in what direction it's going to go in. It's either going to be at somebody, it's going to be, into drinking or drugging or car accidents or, whatever. So it's so important for us to do that grief work because if we don't, it's not going to clear. Feelings are energies. So when we
Sure.
do grief and we release energies, it clears our nervous system out and allows all of that energy to flow freely. And then we feel connected. And then, here's where the woo woo part comes in because you can see my hands going. But it's like we're not taught how to grieve and we're not taught how to hold space to grieve. That right there is one of the biggest things that I've been trying to convey to people or working on conveying to people, where if someone's grieving and it's affecting you, don't tell them to stop. Don't cry. Well, you're you're inevitably telling them to hold their sadness inside, which is going to blow up later on because you can't handle it. So I
Right.
usually tell people, if you're with somebody, you hold their space, you don't say a word, you say, do you need me to put my hand on you? Do you need me to say anything? You ask them what they need. You don't assume that they want you to tell them to stop grieving, because that's usually not the case, because that's not how it works.
Right.
So that's a good, that the way you described that was really, really powerful, because it's just people, I think people need to understand that, it's just such an important piece of our humanness in this
Well,
lifetime.
and what really came through that now as part of my practice is a lot of times when I engage with people, the question is what is it that you need to accept if there's something that is creating a dissonance for you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that the grief will oftentimes be amplified because of the resistance to that acceptance.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I
So,
know. I hear you.
and part of my journey has also been I've been a caretaker for both my father as he was getting towards the end of his life. Though my mother did the vast majority of it, I was still present in helping him in a lot of ways. And then I also helped my friend whose mother passed away, and I was helping caretake. And what it was that was interesting was the people that were around it. Now, my father was the case where he didn't want to accept. Like I had to be the one that had to say to him, the keys are being taken away from you. You don't get to drive anymore. And he didn't want to accept that, and it just
Mhm.
created all kinds of grief for all of us. In the other case, it was the that my friend didn't want to accept that his mother was going to have to go into a facility that was going to be really not very pleasant. But that's what she had earned karmically. And
Mhm.
so, what my journey taught me was that when something creates an anxiety, trigger or a depression trigger, my mind now goes, "What am I needing to accept that I am not facing?" Because that's where I need to find. I need to find that. That's what's really what I've got to figure out how to move towards. And so part of my acceptance in my particular journey was needing to actually take medicine, to actually take a synthetic medicine, which is one of the things I did resist until I couldn't resist it any longer after my third visit to the ER, thinking I had a heart attack. And the ER doctor said, "No, you're inducing it on yourself because of your anxiety." And he said, "Unfortunately, because your body, your 3D body has created a chemical loop, the only way we can help you break that is with another chemical that is stronger than meditation." And I jokingly say this sometimes. It's like if you have appendicitis, don't go to a shaman, go to the hospital, get the surgery. That's what
Mhm.
it's there for.
Mhm.
Everything has its purpose if you use it correctly. And
Mhm.
that's what I learned. I used the medication. I ended up going on Zoloft. That was the one that I selected. And it was a random selection because they don't have any way of testing you to find out which one will work for you or not. I mean, there's still a lot about modern medicine that's miraculous. That's also like, are you kidding me? This is actually how you do it. But that's just the journey. I got
Mhm.
lucky. I picked the right one, and I was on it for almost 2 years, and then I got off of it. And then I had learned my lesson that when I had a recurring situation, I got back on it again for about 7 months, and then I got back off of it, and I've been off of it now for 4 or 5 years. But if it comes up, I won't hesitate to use it
Mhm.
because I know what it's for and I know how to use it properly. So,
Well, and that's helpful because most of us don't know how to. I mean, there are people who are on that kind of stuff for years and years and years, and it actually, for a lot of people, um, what's the word?
well, it can make it worse. It can make you more
Suppresses. There,
depressed.
there it is. Okay.
And not only that, but your body builds up resistance to
Well,
it.
yeah, well, it suppresses the medications can suppress the emotions, so to the point where you're not feeling the emotions and you can't express them. So there's that, because I kind of fall in the same realm as not taking medications either, and I ended up getting on Paxil, but it was like a early form of it, which was not extended release. So when I got on it, I literally felt like I was swimming in a fishbowl. Everything was like
Right.
this, and I couldn't. And then the reason that they put me on it was for depression. And then I read the side effects, and it said not eating. And that was the whole reason I went to the doctor to begin with, because I wasn't eating because I was stressing out. So that didn't, I mean, I was in charge of that one similarly, but I got off. I told him, I said, I'm not staying on this forever. I'm going to wean myself off when it's time. So six
Right.
months later, and I said that I was like 6 months, that's it. But
Well, and I think the entry point is like you said, and this is what I would offer is that you have to really think about how you're going to try something, what your measurement of it is, that you have someone that can give you some feedback outside of yourself. I mean, that was one of the things that was part of it, and understand, how the cycle of something works, what the different dosages are, and to realize that your body is also going to respond perhaps differently. That's
Mhm.
one of the things that it's about. But yes,
Yeah.
the depression, the anxiety were. Once I discovered they were healing states, it absolutely changed how I processed them and was able to utilize them in what would eventually become the most optimal way and to come back out of them.
Yeah, yeah, but that's the thing. It's like when we have that knowledge and we can do that for ourselves. If we depend on someone else completely, then we lose all authority over our own way of healing. I mean, we have to be part of the process.
Right. We have to
They-
dialogue. We have to be able
yeah,
to, you have to understand that it's our agency, but it's also, when I was working with the professionals, I said, I need you to explain to me how to get on this and how to get off of it.
yeah,
And what should I look at as a measure of things based on your experience? And then I'm going to use myself as my own guide. So
right,
it's
right.
it's definitely a process that you have to enter into with a willingness to learn from others if that's their area of expertise, but also still follow your own guidance for yourself. It's a dialogue. It absolutely
Yeah.
is.
And then you have to make sure you find the right person.
Absolutely.
That's a whole nother thing. At least it's getting easier nowadays. Uh, okay, so this one's pretty, to me, is pretty important question. Can you talk to us a little bit about how astrology in general, well, you kind of did it, but if there's any other information, how it can guide us through our lives, and then link it to some information on what's going on in the world right now, which we kind of did that too, but I'd like to go a little bit deeper.
Sure.
Um, and how it's related to our healing and uncovering the truth of who we are and where all of this is going at this point.
Certainly. So one of the things to realize, of course, is that when you get your chart done, it is going to be set up in a particular way. So you're going to have energy in certain locations, and the way it's broken down is by pie pieces. It's divided up into 12 sections. Each section represents a different area of life. We call them houses. They're ruled by a zodiac sign. There are 12 signs that go with each of the houses. And then the points end up in those locations based on your time of birth. So whatever's going on in terms of the current energy is hitting your chart, like you're walking around like an energy field. And so, as an example, Neptune, the one of the outer planets that deals with spirituality, just went into Aries. So, as an astrologer, when someone comes to me, I'm going to go, okay, what does Neptune and Aries mean for everyone? Like just Neptune and Aries. Neptune and Aries is an energy of focusing spirituality because Aries is about pioneering and action. And Neptune is not an action point, and Neptune is spirituality, dreams, imagination. So going into Aries means that it's kind of being put into a type of energy that's not really where it's comfortable. That means that ideologically there's going to be a lot more aggression while Neptune is in Aries. Now, let's connect that in terms of its cycle. Cycle is approximately 147 years. Um, and so that means the last time Neptune was in Aries was from 1862 to 1875, 1878. Well, when was that in terms of our world history? That was the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
Notice any Civil War behavior going on in the world right now, especially in the United States? So these patterns are there. Now the question is where is Aries in your chart? Where is Aries in my chart? Now, in my chart, it happens to be in the sixth house, which deals with service and health and my daily routines.
And where is
Um,
Aries in my house? Because you have that.
right. So in terms
I'll
of
let
your
you. I'll
house,
let you share.
so in your case, Aries rules your 11th house, which deals with community. So this period of Aries going through your story is about how you're going to be spiritually a pioneer for the community at this time. Now,
Okay.
what's interesting is that we also look at it and go, okay, well, what have you got in Aries and what have I got in Aries? Now, what's interesting is I have 6 points in Aries. So Neptune going through Aries is going to be a lot for me in
Hmm.
terms of direct impact. What's interesting for you, however, is that your 11th house, the house where Aries is empty. So we
Right.
were we were talking about before we did our session, when we did our astrocartography session, one of the places we identified was Idaho. And you were like, "Oh my God, I don't want to go to Idaho." But if we look at Neptune going into Aries and sending you to a location where you've got to be a pioneer spiritually in a community, that actually fits. Now, you have free will. Again, when I tell people about astrology, you have free will. You can go, well, I appreciate that, Philip, but no, if I were 25 and I were starting out and I wanted to, break boundaries, then maybe I'd do it.
I'm not afraid of breaking boundaries, Philip.
No,
What
no, I know
what
that.
I'm concerned with is showing up as woo-woo in an area that's more like the way I was raised, which is not woo-woo.
Right. But you can see how the explanation
Yeah.
then be applied to a real life example. And
Yeah.
you
Okay.
can respond to me like you can respond to me and go, Philip, Idaho is a bridge too far. And I'll be like, hey, I trust you. If you say that that's a bridge too far, that's okay. I'm just letting you know that it's interesting that this is a kind of synchronicity that shows up, and you don't have to go quite that far, but you're going to have that role no matter where you go. In other words,
Okay.
Neptune going into Aries and going into your 11th house means that whatever community you do decide to be part of, you will be sort of resonating this energy and people will respond to it about you. So, so the idea then is that when we're using astrology, right, literally using it, this is why I keep coming back to the idea that I need to know what's going on in your chart. Well, guess what? The United States has a chart too,
Hmm.
and I
Yes,
can look at
please
the
talk
U.S.
about that. Let's
right.
talk about that if you don't mind. Let's talk about.
So, so one of the things I may have mentioned earlier was that Capricorn, which is where Pluto was, it was in Capricorn at the birth of the nation. It just finished up its journey through there. So for me as an astrologer to see the United States getting completely upheaved, transformed, life and death kind of energy, birth and yeah, absolutely. Now it's entered Aquarius, and Aquarius is going to be the period of time where we're going to have Pluto rearranging the social structures. So one of the things that I can say is that things that you think may not could ever go away while Pluto's going through Aquarius, yeah, we could be without a stock market a few years from now. Higher education could be completely gone by the time this transit's done. That's the kind of revolutionary energy we're talking about. And as an astrologer, looking at it and going, okay, well, where are these things happening in the US chart, right? Then that lets me know what's going on with each of these transits. So, for example, the transit of Neptune going into Aries means that last time it was in Aries was the Civil War for the United States. Uranus, which is another outer point, is currently in Taurus. The last time it was there, 1934 to 1942. And guess what happened in 1935? The creation of the Social Security Act. Is Social Security getting, potentially taken apart? Certainly would make sense that it would happen under the transit it was created, which is the one that's going on right now. So living in,
Take a
from
breath. Everybody take a breath. It's okay. Everything's going to be okay. But that's also part of this process too.
well, and part of it too is when I work with my clients is to say, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not trying to create. There are amazing things that are happening. I mean, not only do we have, Uranus, because what Uranus and Taurus also did was it brought about, women in the workforce. It brought about modern advances in medication that we have absolutely benefited from. There is nothing about any transit that is good or bad, but they are behaving a certain way, and Uranus is absolutely disruptive. And it's a disruption that can be kind of shocking. It can bring brand new things in, it can take other things out very quickly. So a lot of what we're seeing as Uranus is actually the transit of Uranus is coming to an end in Taurus. And we look at what's going on with the disruption that's happening, especially let's use the tariff situation, right? There's a deglobalization that's happening, and it's happening very fast. And the globalization, or how we would look at economies of scale, that's Taurus. Taurus is the foundations on which we built. Uranus blows up foundations. So I can't be surprised. I mean, when I'm looking at it as an astrologer going, oh yeah, this stuff's getting blown up. That's what this transit's supposed to be doing, right? Now the idea is that you need to blow them up in order to bring other things in. Now the question becomes what gets brought in.
Mhm.
Now, once again, I know there are a lot of people that would like to go, oh, it's the new age. It's going to be this. I'm like, The shadow side of Aquarius or Uranus energy is fascism. The positive side of it is equality. Neptune in Aries is a battle of ideologies. One of them is going to come out on top, and then we're going to have to deal with what that is. I know which one I'd like it to be. I mean, from a personal standpoint of, I like the world to be safe and positive and all these things, but I also know if our souls are supposed to learn something, we're going to get the learning lesson regardless. What I want to inform people with astrology is what's the environment
Well,
and then how's it affecting you personally?
yeah, and what would you say? I mean, this is kind of a little scary for I'm sure a lot of people, you know.
Sure.
What would you say to people of what they could do in the process to walk through this and not feel like they're like being ripped apart? You know what I mean?
Well, so one of the things that, first of all, and this goes back, and we can pull all of this together, right? People are experiencing a form of grief as these things are happening.
The dark
And
night
they're
of the
going
soul.
through denial,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
They're going through anger.
Hmm.
They're going through bargaining. Bargaining, to me, bargaining is the nastiest one of them all.
Yep.
Bargaining is, hey, the relationship's over, but let's go get counseling. No, it's over, accept it. But if you try to do the bargaining thing, you just make it worse, right? So the truth is people are going to have to consider radical decisions in alignment with radical energy. What would that look like actually? I've got certain clients, I'm like, okay, say your social security check stops. Really? Run through the scenario. That happens. What do you do? What is it that do you have family you could go live with? Do you have another resource that you can pull upon? What is it you have to do? Because you definitely don't want to be caught blindsided, and you may need to be thinking about the situation. So, I've got a lot of clients that have contacted me recently. Part of their astrocartography has been, can I live where my family lives? Because I'm probably going to need some support from them. I'm like, yeah. And it may not even be your biological family. It may be that one of the things, and we were talking about this before you got us on the recording, was getting some land and building tiny homes and having a community, right? Well, the truth of the matter is that that's the one thing that we can see as part of the United States story is we have become so disconnected that we don't have these networks, and we've decided to put all of our network onto this governmental system that now energetically whoever we elected is an archetype of what the spirit of the country has to have, and it is blowing stuff up, which is in alignment with transits. So what that means is people are going to have to think about, and this is what I would say your people are listening to, is you're going to have to probably make some really radical considerations about how you're living your life and how you can build some safety into it by connecting with people in a way that you would not have thought of before, because this energy would not have created this thought for you if it wasn't this dramatic. And yes, it's dramatic. There's no way around it.
And how do we unscare people out of that?
Well, the idea is that first of all, it's like the depression, anxiety thing that we've been talking about is first of all, you've got to recognize that on a spiritual standpoint, you're here to learn this lesson. What do you need to do to start actually embracing that?
And that's what we focus on. Instead of focusing on the fear, we focus on whatever that solution is to the problem. Right.
Right.
Well,
And this
that's a given, right?
right. And so the solution is going to be in its own way uncomfortable.
Oh, mm-hmm.
The solution is we need to start rebuilding our networks with people. We need to start connecting with people. We need to know who our next door neighbor is in case we need to borrow some sugar, right?
Well, and that's the thing is like we've been so taught how not to do that and how to and being separated. I won't go down that one. That this generation, none of these generations now really understand how to do that. So yeah, there's a fine
It's gonna be a
line
learning,
process on how right,
it's
but
gonna be a learning curve.
it doesn't require freaking out because if we freak out, our frontal lobe goes offline and then we can't think anyway. So
Right.
breathing helps, meditating helps, healing
Absolutely.
helps. All that stuff is it's part of the that's why I said it's part of the process. And I want to ask you this because it's interesting when you were talking about that, this phrase came to my mind. Well, not a phrase, but a thought. Specifically, there really isn't anyone to blame. It's like what's happening is based off of a catalyst from the arrangement of the stars. So who do you blame for that? Because it's you're going to go blame the universe.
Well, and again, the thing about it is if you want to one of the things that when I used to teach would talk about degrees of difference. So, you know, and a degree of the difference might be like this. Let's say you need to break up with someone and you want to break up with them. There's a different degree of doing that if you do it on their birthday versus doing it on a random day in the middle of the month. Or if you do it on Christmas Eve as opposed to a random day in the middle of the month. We can make distinctions about, a degree of difference. So on some level, and I'm a contributor, if any of us that are listening or anyone that has bought anything from Walmart, we have all contributed to the problem. Now, we don't all contribute at the same level, obviously. Some of us realize, oh, I don't want to do that. I want to buy organic. I want to support local farmers, all this, that, and the other. But we all are part of the zeitgeist. We are part of this situation. And then it comes back down to what can I first do to make sure that I'm taking care of myself and not in a selfish, like I need to build a bunker and, have a lot of guns and keep people away from it, but more in the sense of, I realize that I'm settled about who I am. How can I then start helping people? How can we start finding out what that network would look like? Because what we're going to be faced with is a lot of, you know, reality in our face. These transits are hardcore. They are, but they also have a time limit. That's the other thing, is that in periods of history, the war started and the war ended. The war started and the war ended. The war, so there is a cycle to it. And what the astrology gives me in comfort in knowing is that, okay, right now we're at the peak of the transition because Pluto just finished going out of Capricorn into Aquarius. Neptune and Saturn are going to bounce back and forth between Pisces and Aries all the way until the beginning of 2026. By March of 2026, Saturn and Neptune will be permanently in Aries. We'll know where they're going. That will be followed by Uranus, which will bounce back and forth between Taurus and Gemini. But by middle of next year, after May, Uranus will be permanently in Gemini. We will start to see what is. That will always be part of the journey. But right now, it is completely disruptive, and that's what we're having to face is that things are being disrupted. And we've really had a lot of calm for a really long time, generally speaking. And so it's really difficult when you don't have that training of dealing with the difficulty to be faced with it and realize, wait a second, these things that I thought were like truisms, they're just constructs. The entire
Right.
thing is a construct.
Yeah, and what I'm getting now too is that like each of us, the reason we do our own healing work is for us to discover our truth, to
Right.
discover why we're here on this planet. And like what you were saying for me, a spiritual pioneer of communities, right? So what it sounds like is that's when we are able to do the work and to um, heal ourselves, we start to recognize and to go see Philip, by the way. There's a plug. Then you'll know what it is that you need to do on this planet. And you can start focusing on that instead of all the stuff outside of you that's going crazy. Because when you're focused on that, you're really focusing on yourself and you're focusing on what you like. I've always wanted to envision what I want to see in the world, not what I don't want to see in the world. And the
Sure.
more we focus, that's the law of attraction. If we're focusing on what we don't want to see, we're going to get more of it. If we start focusing on what we're here to do, we're going to get more of it, right? So
Right.
why not do that and go see Philip? Plug
Well,
number two.
and here's the thing also, let's really get it down to the very concrete. So your positioning of Neptune going into your 11th house and my positioning of Neptune going into the 6th house, here's a really great way to distinguish it is you are with Neptune going into your 11th house, you're supposed to be doing what you're doing right now, which is you're talking to the community. You've invited me on as a guest, but I'm not going to be doing a podcast to reach out to the wider world because Neptune's going through my 6th house, which is about the one-on-one experience.
Mm-hmm.
So the difference for each of us in terms of what Neptune's doing is mine is going to stay in that one-on-one engagement. So whoever might listen to this and come contact me for that, that is serving the purpose of that Neptune in Aries. For
Interesting.
you, however, it is building your platform, getting more aware of how you're going to promote yourself, how you're going to get to larger communities and have communities actually respond to you. So that's also a good way to explain why it's different when it's going through someone's 6th house, in my case, and someone's 11th house, in your case. And other listeners, they might be having to go through their 8th house, which has to do with their intimate relationship, while someone else has got to go through their 4th house, which deals with their family. We're all going to get a little something different. And once we know that, we know how to leverage it in the best possible way.
Right, right. And just because you have yours in what's the relationship house eight?
Eighth house is intimate
I
relationship.
remembered. If yours happens to be with relationship, maybe it's just your growth process for your soul to heal the relationships within your family. Maybe that's it, or with yourself, or whatever.
Absolutely.
And that's okay too, because the more people that heal within ourselves and with our families, that contributes to the positive.
It does. It
Yeah,
does.
yeah. So
But
just want to.
that also helps identify where to put your energy.
Right, right. And you don't have to do something huge. And I mean, it's not, if this is huge, I'm going to throw up. That's all I got to say. But behind the scenes kind of gal, you know? But anyway, that's what I just want you to know, that when you focus here instead of where you have no control, you have
Right.
control here. That's where you're going to see results, as long as you follow this process of healing and releasing energy and grieving and doing these things. Having the dark nights of the soul, yes, they suck, but we need them. Okay, so that's kind of what I think that we're saying, right,
Sure.
Philip? Okay,
Yes, absolutely.
so I'm going to jump right into the questions that I normally ask everybody. I am going to skip one because we already talked about it. So how do you define awakening?
Uh, I guess the way I would define awakening is when you realize that a pre-existing position that you held no longer works, and you realize that something you're encountering that's new is showing you a direction that you need to go in
Mm, as a human,
as a human.
as a human. Okay, thank you. All right. Now, this seems to be popping up a lot lately with the divine feminine and the divine masculine. So I want to ask what your thoughts are on the healing of the divine feminine and how it relates to the healing of the divine masculine.
Well, I would certainly feel comfortable arguing that the divine masculine has certainly had a long run that has been um, obviously gotten out of balance.
Mhm.
And generally, when there's a rebalancing, there's that final push that's really extreme. And so I think we're seeing that sort of hyper masculinity, a hyper divine masculine, um, because each of the energies are trying to, of course, manifest themselves. And so I think the divine feminine got a little bit of a push, and then the reaction from the divine masculine, or at least the more, and I think divine is really not the right way to put it, but a certain aspect of the masculine lives in fear,
Mhm.
and it's vice versa. Both a certain aspect of the feminine lives in fear of the masculine. And so once again, to me, the idea of this energy is that it's always moving back and forth for us to figure out where we are learning our own story about it. But I think that for the moment, we're definitely seeing what we might describe as a masculine backlash
Mhm.
to feminine energy that really started to have an impact that was taking away a presumptive attitude about power, because those two energies actually handle power very differently. But they're supposed to integrate with one another. They're supposed to have a loving conversation between the two. And we've got to figure out how to get to that loving conversation. But sometimes it takes breaking things before there can be space for that. And I think we're in sort of a breaking phase right now.
Yeah, yeah, and also too, I mean, and when you're talking about masculine and feminine, it's not necessarily males and females.
No, no,
It's an energy, and it's
right.
an energy of uh action and force and competition versus receptivity and creation and life and giving and all of that for eons in this world has been suppressed. And so now it's starting to poke its head back up, and people are starting to see that it actually changes the energies of things. And of course, the masculine, is going to push back until it starts to balance like a pendulum. It's going to until it comes back in the middle
Sure.
somewhere, which is how we balance, So, yeah, agreed. Okay. How can people get in touch with you?
Um, so the easiest way is through my website, which is Black Unicorn, but unicorn is spelled in an unusual way. It's UNYKORN.com. So that's the easiest thing. But if you want to find out about my pricing, you want to find out about all the different things that I do in terms of offerings, the website is the way to go. If you go to the website, you're going to be able to get all the details. And because I'm an Aries, I'm very upfront about my pricing. I've never liked the idea of you need to call me to find out the price. It's like, no, this is what it is. This is what I charge. So you can find out everything from my website.
All right, thank you. And is there anything else that you'd like to share with everyone before we wrap up?
Well, I think in line with what you said, which is that we're here experiencing these things. They are very difficult, but it is a chance for us to find out who we are. And the phrase that I use a lot in this particular time frame is pressure makes diamonds.
Mm,
And the idea of it is that we're going to discover a lot about ourselves. We usually only do when we're challenged. A favorite saying of mine is nobody gets their character tested when things are going their way. And so we've got a lot of things that are not feeling like they're going our way to find out what our character actually is.
right,
And so, again, it's an amazing time to be alive. It's a difficult time to be alive. It's all those things that it's generally been, but it's definitely heightened right now. If people are picking up on that, you're not missing the boat. It is definitely a heightened time of activity. So.
but we
And
will
if I
get
can help
through
you in any
this.
way, I
Yes,
would love to. And thank you also for what you're doing and allowing me a platform and all the people you're connecting with. Because again, I think that's part of your story is to be able to, connect with these people and share this knowledge. And that's what matters is whoever finds this particular podcast, they were absolutely meant to hear it.
I hear that. All right. Well, thank you, Philip. I appreciate all of this,
You're welcome.
no matter what angle it went to.
Yes,
And I just want to say I appreciate you at all levels, especially, having hired him to share what exactly is going on for me to follow this process and not second guess it like I've been doing for so long. So thank you for that. And
absolutely.
thank you, everyone, for being here on Awakening Soul Divinity podcast. And I wish you the best and know that you, as long as you ask, you do have an outlet to do your healing work and to find out the truth of who you are. So thank you. And I guess that's about it. Peace.